The man from the county came on a Tuesday, and he came with a list. I remember it was Tuesday because I had bread in the oven and 9 pairs of boots drying by the stove, and the smell of warm flour was the only good thing in that house when the knock landed hard against my door. I wiped my hands on my apron. I was 41 years old that winter, a widow 2 years running, and I had learned that nobody knocks soft when they've come to take something from you. His name was Mr. Aldous Pell. He had a thin gray coat and a thinner mouth, and he held that paper like it was a verdict already signed. "Mrs. Mercer," he said, "we need to talk about the children." Behind me, the house went quiet, the way a house goes quiet when frightened children are trying very hard not to be heard. I did not turn around. I knew they were all there on the stairs. Sarah, with the baby on her hip, the twins peering through the rail, little Tom with his thumb halfway to his mouth. 9 of them. 9 children that the good people of Juniper Bend, Wyoming Territory, had decided in the year 1887 that nobody wanted. "They're fed," I said. "They're warm. They're learning their letters. What is there to talk about?" Mr. Pell looked past me into the house, and I watched him counting heads like a man counting cattle he meant to sell. "There's the matter of them not being yours," he said. And there it was, the thing I had been bracing against since the fever took the Hartley family up the ridge, and the Coles after them, and left their little ones scattered like seed across a country that had no soft place to put them. I had taken them in one by one. A boy left sleeping in a cold wagon. 2 sisters standing outside a church no one would open. A baby handed to me over a fence by a dying woman who only said, "Please," and then said nothing ever again. I had not asked permission. There had been no one left to ask. "They had no people," I told him. "I am their people now." Mr. Pell unfolded his paper. "The county sees it differently. A woman alone. No husband, no income to speak of. 9 dependents on a quarter section of failing land." He let that hang. "There are families in Cheyenne, in Laramie. Good homes that would take 1, maybe 2. The county is prepared to place them properly." Place them properly. As though they were dishes to be sorted into separate cupboards. "Separate them, you mean," I said, and my voice did something I did not give it permission to do. It shook. "Mrs. Mercer, you cannot keep 9 children on goodwill and bread." He was right, and that was the worst of it. The hay was low, the well ran slow in winter. I had sold my husband's good saddle in October and my mother's brooch in November, and December had come asking for January's portion already. I had been telling the children we were fine in a voice I no longer believed, and children always know. They always know. "Give me till spring," I said. "The wagon comes Friday," said Mr. Pell. 3 days. He gave me 3 days to take apart a family with my own hands. He tipped his hat as though he'd done me a kindness, and he climbed back into his buggy, and I stood in my doorway and watched him roll down the rutted road until the cold drove me back inside. When I turned, all 9 of them were looking at me. Sarah, who was 12 and too old for her years, asked the question none of the little ones could form. "Are they taking us away?" I am not a liar by nature, but I looked at those 9 faces and I said, "No. Nobody is taking anybody anywhere." And I prayed that for once in my life I would be able to make a thing true just by needing it badly enough. That night I did not sleep. I sat at the table with the lamp turned low and I did the arithmetic of the impossible, over and over, hoping the numbers would rearrange themselves into mercy. They never did. By the time the rooster called, I had decided I would beg. I would ride into town and I would go down on my knees in front of the whole council if I had to, and I would beg them to let me keep my children. I never got the chance, because that was the morning the cowboy came. I heard the horse first, a slow, easy walk, no hurry in it. I had my hand on the rifle by the door before I had my shawl on my shoulders, because a woman alone learns to greet strangers with both. When I stepped onto the porch, there was a man dismounting in my yard, tall and weathered, with a gray-flecked beard and a hat gone soft from years of weather. He moved careful, the way men move when they don't want to spook anybody. "Morning, ma'am," he said. "I'm looking for the Mercer place." "You've found it, and I'll thank you to state your business." He took his hat off, which surprised me. "Name's Wade Calloway. I knew your husband, ma'am. Knew Daniel back when we both drove cattle up out of Texas. Before he settled. Before I, well, before I didn't. He turned the hat slow in his hands. I heard down at the freight office in town that Daniel passed. 2 years back. I'm sorry to be late saying it. I've been a long way west. Daniel. Nobody had said my husband's name like they meant it in 2 years. I felt the rifle grow heavy in my hands. He passed peaceful, I said, because it was true. He'd gone in his sleep one summer night, his heart simply stopping, no struggle, no pain. I'd found him in the morning looking like a man who had laid his burdens down at last. He thought well of his cattle days. He never did say much, but he kept a picture of those drives in his head, I think. Wade Calloway nodded slow. Then his eyes went past me, to the window, where I knew without looking that a row of small faces had appeared. Those all yours? He asked. I lifted my chin. I was 41 years old, and I had buried a husband and outlived my own fear, and I was done apologizing to men for the children I loved. They're mine, I said. Every one. And if you've come to tell me they're not, you can climb back on that horse. But Wade Calloway didn't climb back on his horse. He stood there in my cold yard, with his hat in his hands, looking at those 9 faces in the window, like a man looking at something he'd been searching for without knowing it. And when he spoke, his voice had gone rough. I had a family once, he said. Long time ago. A wife. A little girl. He stopped, started again. Fever came through the camp one winter, and it didn't leave anybody behind for me to bury proper. After that I just rode. 46 years old, and I've got nothing to my name but a horse and a saddle, and a habit of leaving before anybody can ask me to stay. He looked at me. I don't know why I came here. I told myself I was paying respects to Daniel, but I think maybe I just wanted to stand in a yard where a family lived. I should have sent him on his way. A strange man with sorrow on him is a dangerous thing, and I had 9 reasons to be careful. But there was something in how he stood that I recognized, because I saw it in my own glass every morning. The look of a person carrying more than 2 hands can hold. So instead I said, "There's coffee on, and you look like you've ridden through worse than my temper." He ate at my table that morning like a man who'd forgotten what a table was for. The children watched him the way children watch a new animal, with suspicion that wears off faster than any grown person's. Little Tom, who was 4 and had not spoken above a whisper since his mother died, walked right up to Wade Calloway and held out his wooden horse, the only thing the boy owned in this world, and Wade took it in his big rough hands, as gentle as if it were made of glass. "That's a fine animal," Wade said. "What's his name?" And Tom, in front of all of us, in a voice none of us had heard in months, said, "Daniel." I had to turn to the stove so they wouldn't see my face. Over coffee, I told him. I don't know why. Maybe because he'd lost a family too, and grief knows its own kind. I told him about the fevers up the ridge, the parents gone one after another, peaceful most of them but gone all the same, and the children left with no one. I told him how I'd taken them in, and I told him about Mr. Aldous Pell and his thin gray coat and his list, and the wagon that was coming Friday to carry my children off in different directions, 1 to Cheyenne and 2 to Laramie, and the rest scattered God knew where, never to see each other's faces again in this life. When I finished, Wade Calloway was quiet a long time. The fire popped. The baby slept against Sarah's shoulder. "Friday," he said. "Friday," I said. He stood up from my table. He set his cup down careful. He picked his hat up off the peg by the door, and for one cold instant I thought, of course, he is leaving too. They all leave. That is what the world does. But he didn't put the hat on. He held it, and he looked around that crowded little room, at the boots drying by the stove and the letters chalked on a slate, and the baby's small fist, and 9 children, who nobody in the whole wide territory had wanted, and something in his weathered face settled, like a man making up his mind about the rest of his life. "No, ma'am," he said quietly. "No, they're not." "Not what?" I asked. "Not abandoned." He turned to me, and his eyes were wet and steady both at once. "Folks keep saying these children belong to nobody. I've heard it twice already, just riding into this town. Nobody's children. Well," his jaw worked, "I'm somebody. And starting right now, they're mine." I did not understand him at first. I think I asked him what he meant. And Wade Calloway, 50 miles of road still on his boots, told me what he meant. He meant to stay. He meant to put his name to that quarter section so the county couldn't call it a woman alone. He meant to mend the well and lay in hay and ride into Juniper Bend on Friday morning and stand between Mr. Aldous Pell and my front door and tell the whole county that these 9 children had a father now, and a roof, and a name, and they were going nowhere. "You can't just decide that," I whispered. "You don't even know them." "I knew Daniel," he said, "and Daniel would not have wanted his wife's house pulled apart while a man who owed him stood by and did nothing." He looked at little Tom, still clutching the wooden horse named for my husband. "Besides, I've been looking for a family for 9 years, ma'am. Seems unkind of the Lord to walk me straight into one and expect me to keep riding." I want to tell you I was strong. I want to tell you I held my dignity. But I had been holding everything alone for 2 years, the whole weight of 9 children and a failing farm, and a cold bed, and when this stranger stood in my kitchen and offered to take 1 corner of that weight, I sat down in my chair, and I wept the way I had not let myself weep since Daniel died. And Sarah came and put the baby in my arms, and the twins pressed against my knees, and Wade Calloway stood by the door, turning his hat and letting a worn-out woman cry, without making her feel small for it. Friday came the way hard things always come, right on time. The wagon rolled up the rutted road just past 9, and Mr. Aldous Pell sat on the bench in his thin gray coat with 2 other men beside him and that same list in his hand. I stood on my porch in my good dress, the one I'd married Daniel in, because if they meant to take my children, I would not let them do it to a woman who looked beaten. And beside me, in a clean shirt with his beard trimmed and his back straight, stood Wade Calloway. Mr. Pell climbed down. He looked at Wade. He looked at his list. He looked at Wade again. "And who," he said, "is this?" "Wade Calloway." Wade's voice carried easy across the yard. "I own this place now. Filed the papers in town yesterday afternoon. You can ride back and check the registry if you like. It's all proper. And these are my children." He said it plain, like a fact of weather. "All 9. So you can take that list, Mr. Pell, and you can cross every one of their names right off it." Mr. Pell's thin mouth opened and shut. "You can't simply claim 9 children. A man can claim what he's willing to feed, clothe, and raise to grown," Wade said. "That's the only claim that's ever meant anything. You came here to scatter these little ones across the territory because they were nobodies." He stepped down off the porch, slow, and he stood in front of that wagon the way I had imagined he would, the way a fence stands between a storm and a house. "Well, I'm telling you to your face, and in front of these witnesses, they were never nobodies. They were always going to be somebodies. Took me 46 years, and a long road to figure out that somebody was me. The yard went so still, I could hear the well rope creak. Now I'll tell you, Mr. Aldous Pell was not a wicked man. I have come to believe that. He was a man with a list, and lists make it easy to forget that every name is a child. But something in standing there, in front of 9 faces and 1 stubborn cowboy, and a widow in her wedding dress, seemed to reach the part of him the paper had covered over. He folded the list. He looked at it a long moment. Then he climbed back up onto the bench and he said, not unkindly, "I'll need to see the registry filing, and there'll be papers, adoption papers, for it to hold." "Then we'll sign every one," Wade said. "There'll be no county money in it," Pell warned. "You'll have 9 mouths and no help." Wade Calloway looked back over his shoulder at us, at me, at Sarah and the baby, at the twins, at little Tom holding up his wooden horse for the whole world to see, and he smiled for the first time since he'd ridden into my yard. "Mr. Pell," he said, "I've been the richest man in Wyoming since Tuesday. I just didn't know it till now." The wagon turned around in my yard and rolled back down the road empty, the way I had prayed it would, and my children, our children, spilled off the porch hollering and laughing, and Tom ran straight to Wade and was lifted up onto a shoulder broad enough to carry him, and I stood there in Daniel's favorite dress, and understood that grace does not always come the way you beg for it. Sometimes it does not answer your knees at all. Sometimes it rides up your road on a tired horse, wearing a soft hat, calling your dead husband by name. Wade and I were married in the spring, when the well ran clear again, and the hay stood green. It was not a romance out of a storybook, not at first. It was 2 grown people, him 46 and me 41, who had each buried a family and learned the hard way that love is mostly choosing to stay. But I will tell you that I came to love that man as deep as I loved my first, and in some ways deeper, because the first was the love of a girl who didn't know yet what the world could cost, and the second was the love of a woman who knew exactly and chose it anyway. The children grew. Sarah married a good man and named her first girl after me. The twins took over the cattle and made the farm pay at last. Little Tom, tall and quiet and steady, just like the man who raised him, kept that wooden horse on his mantle his whole life, and told his own children about the morning a cowboy walked into a cold house, full of children nobody wanted, and decided, all on his own, that they were wanted after all. People in Juniper Bend told the story for years. They told it grander than it was, gave Wade a fortune he never had, gave me a beauty I never owned. But they got the heart of it right, which is the only part that ever matters. 9 children, the world had said, that nobody wanted, and one man who looked at them and said, "They're mine now." That is the whole of it. A door, a knock, a list, and then a stranger on a tired horse who decided that no child under God's sky is truly nobody's, so long as one person is willing to stand in the yard and claim them. If you are out there tonight feeling like nobody's, like you got left in a cold wagon, like the world made a list and your name fell off it, remember Wade Calloway turning his hat in his hands. The people meant to be your family do not always arrive when you call. Sometimes they arrive on a Tuesday you weren't expecting, late and weathered and carrying their own grief. And they look at you, and they decide. You were never nobodies. You were always going to be somebody's. And sometimes, if you can just hold on through Friday, somebody walks in the door.